Well, good evening, everyone, and shalom. I'm Archit Seshadri. Thank you so much for joining us. This is WION World is One News. The time now is 9:35 in New York, 4:35 p.m. in Tel Aviv, and 7:05 here in New Delhi. Tonight, we have a special broadcast. Over the next 60 minutes, we're going to focus on India and Israel's relationship. We just saw Prime Minister Narendra Modi arriving in Israel for a 3-day trip. This is the first time an Indian Prime Minister will visit the state. Defense, diplomacy, agriculture, water management, and trade will dominate the talks over the course of the next 72 hours. We want to focus in on why Israel is putting on such a huge red carpet welcome. What's in it for Israel? What's in it for India? What are some of the political ramifications? We'll also take a look at the unknown friends that Israel has. And to get perspective on all of this, let's introduce tonight's guests. First up, we have Joel Lobby, a journalist from Reuters in Hong Kong, an anchor and reporter who's a political expert on international relations and all things Israel. Also, we have Arsen Ostrovsky, an executive director for the Israeli Jewish Congress from Tel Aviv. And finally, here in New Delhi, we have Reuben Israel, an Indian Jewish publisher who has lived in Delhi for quite a long time. We'll get to our guests and continue the conversation in a short while. But first, let's get some background on this issue of diplomacy with all of our background. So let's first start this right up. Prime Minister Modi's visit to Israel will mark the first time that an Indian Prime Minister will be in the country. Modi has long admired Israel for its military might and technical expertise. India, though, has been careful in drawing a diplomatic line not to upstate other Arab states like Iran. Modi is lifting the curtain on a thriving military relationship. He'll talk to his Israeli counterpart Benjamin Netanyahu to advance sales and production of missiles, drones, and radar systems. Netanyahu says the two leaders have already worked together to build a steadfast friendship between Israel and India. The visit will also deepen ties in security, agriculture, water, energy, and space technology. In fact, Prime Minister Modi spoke to an Israeli TV station, News 2, a short while ago about why he considers this visit important and says Israel is a strong partner, especially on the forefront of technology.
इजराइल ने जिस विपरीत प्राकृतिक वातावरण में विकास किया है, जिसने दुनिया के हर किसी का ध्यान आकर्षित किया है, इतने कम समय में इजराइल ने अपने आप को जहां पहुंचाया है विकास के क्षेत्र में, उसकी सराहना सब कोई करते हैं। इजराइल कहते ही इनोवेशन, टेक्नोलॉजी, स्टार्टअप्स, स्पेस, एग्रीकल्चर, ऑप्टिमम यूटिलाइजेशन, ये इजराइल की पहचान है। ये सारी चीजें ऐसी हैं जो भारत के साथ भी बहुत ही सुसंगत बैठती हैं। तो ये सारी चीजें ऐसी हैं जो इजराइल के साथ कंधे से कंधा मिला करके विकास की यात्रा को आगे बढ़ाने के काम आ सकती हैं।
All right, so what exactly is the give and take between the two countries, between India and Israel, especially when it comes to food, culture, terror, technology, trade? Let's bring our guests back in, Joel, Arsen, and Reuben, to get perspective. Arsen, we'll start with you first up. You're there in Israel. What is the visit of Modi being perceived as there on the ground? The first time an Indian PM is visiting the country. How are the local preparations and the mood there?
Look, first of all, thank you for having me. Look, there's really a great deal of excitement here. I'm sure you saw the welcome ceremony to Prime Minister Modi. You know, really, it's difficult to overestimate the truly historic nature of his visit here in every sense of the word. It's, you know, it's a celebration of 25 years of diplomatic relations. You heard Prime Minister Modi, the first words he said were, you know, it is my singular honor to be the first Prime Minister of India to undertake this, this groundbreaking visit. So, you know, there's a lot of anticipation, a lot of excitement, not just within the government of Israel, in recognition of India as one of our most important strategic allies across all fields, trade, diplomatic, military, agriculture, water. We've seen trade in the last decade alone increase by 50%, over $2 billion. You will see during this visit, Prime Minister Netanyahu actually accompany Prime Minister Modi on all his visits throughout his stay. Now, that's something very, very rare that's reserved only to the president.
Right. All right, let's go back to Joel now, standing by in Hong Kong. Joel, let's talk about the political angle for both countries. What does this give each country, Israel and India, sort of on the global arena in terms of multilateral policies? Joel?
Well, Asha, good to see you and talk to you again. So let's talk about the optics first of all, because India and Israel, as Arsene mentioned, we're talking about a 25-year diplomatic relationship, which Israel really wants to hammer home here. There is plenty for both countries to benefit from. And namely, India is the second biggest purchaser of arms. Israel, rather, I should say, is the second biggest supplier of arms to India in the world. So from defence, there is a lot of money to be made. We're talking billions of dollars here. But on the agricultural front, you've got two nations which are essentially dealing with very difficult situations. You've got Israel, which has turned desert into fruit, into water, into essentially taking nothing and turning it into something. And India, a nation with more than 1 billion people, is running out of resources. So Israel will prove an incredible ally when it comes to developing technology that it will need for the future. So Narendra Modi there as part of this incredible celebration of India and Israel relations. But above all else, we're looking at the two countries establishing even more diplomatic ties and furthering their defence, furthering their agricultural relationships, and also looking into startups as well. It's part of the reason that Modi is there, to look into technology that Israel uses every day and how that can work for India as well.
All right, certainly a learning curve for both countries, perhaps picking up a thing or two from each other. Let's bring Ruben back into the conversation here in New Delhi. Ruben, thanks for being here again. How does India's public embrace of Israel strengthen the Jewish state, and what exactly will each side perhaps stand to gain? Ruben?
Well, as a Jew living in India, I don't look at any special advantage that I'll get as a Jew living in India, but as an Indian, the visit that Modi is making, the visit that Mr. Modi has made, is in the process of doing, it's going to have a lot of benefit for us as Indian businessmen in fields of water, energy, agriculture. That's what I'm looking forward to, actually. And I'm looking forward to it becoming a little easier for Indian businessmen to travel to Israel. And at the same time, with their travel to Israel, they must be able to still continue to travel to the Middle Eastern region where they're also doing big business. So that needs to be facilitated.
All right. Let's bring in Arsene back in really quickly. Arsene, I want to also ask you, it's been about a little less than an hour, in fact. We saw the grand royal red carpet welcome for Modi, Prime Minister Modi, as he arrived in Israel. It's something that Israel typically hasn't always offered with other leaders. Correct me if I'm wrong, but why exactly is this such a huge welcome? I mean, has this happened with previous leaders, and why has Modi been given this warm reception? Arsene?
Look, you're correct. This doesn't happen every day. This type of welcome is generally reserved only for the President of the United States. We saw something similar with President Trump when he visited only just recently. It's very, very unheard of also for the Prime Minister of Israel to accompany the foreign head of state or the Prime Minister on all his visits, which is what Netanyahu will be doing here. So I think the real reason for that is Israel really views our relations with India as one of the crowning jewels in our diplomatic policy. We understand what an important regional player India is, the importance of our bilateral relations as well, not only in terms of trade, but in terms of tech innovation, in terms of
right.
So, sure.
All right, let's go quickly to Ruben. I understand you wanted to sort of react to that. What were you about to say there?
There was Modi wearing the Israeli national flag colors, blue and white. There's the red carpet. The only thing missing is Netanyahu wearing the Indian colors,
right? Saffron,
white and green. That would have been a sight to see.
That would have been nice, right?
Agreed.
Well, I did wear the blue tie. Oh. Coincidentally,
where's the
not deliberate. Exactly, I did wear the blue tie, but of course it was pure coincidence. Let's now sort of shift gears, talk about some of the other topics in the interest of time. We want to focus in on this segment about technology and agriculture, two things that are certainly bound to come up on the agenda. Prime Minister Modi, as we talked about, just arrived in Israel, the technological hub there in Tel Aviv. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu received him, a warm reception at the airport, a red carpet royal welcome. Now, this gesture, as we mentioned, is typically reserved for the U.S. President or the Pope. So India could perhaps learn a thing or two about Israel's agricultural best practices, water management, another area, and of course, make in India remains a huge focus for Israel, as it is a major defense supplier for India. So this doesn't come really much of a surprise that Prime Minister Modi will visit an agricultural farm there after this customary welcome. Both Modi and Netanyahu will have the opportunity to interact at a dinner shortly. The two leaders have met twice before in the past. All right, so let's go to Joel standing by. Joel, let's talk about, this segment. I want to focus in on technology and agriculture. Certainly that's going to be high up on the agenda. India could perhaps benefit a thing or two. What could India learn in terms of water management? It's something that the country struggles in many parts of the country that really lacks the water supply. How could they learn from Israel?
Yeah, well, let me just say, Archer, that there was one thing in Netanyahu's speech that really stood out to me, and it was that line I squared, T squared. He's really hammering home to Modi that this visit is about just bonding as many technological ties as possible. Now, from personal experience, having spent a lot of time in Israel, when it comes to water technology and water saving, I think Israel does it better than most nations on earth. They are absolute masters when it comes to irrigation, desalination, any sort of technology that is able to replenish a water supply. And I think that's what Narendra Modi is going to see a lot of throughout his tours of Israel, especially when he goes further south into areas like the Negev and to deserts and even to places like vineyards. Farmland that you will see the land was once arid and is now bearing a lot of fruit. That sort of technology is easily sellable. I mean, I know Israel, for instance, consulted with the desalination plant in Australia, in Sydney, to have that built. And that has turned out to be a piece of technology which has really helped the city in its water consumption. So down the track, that is going to be something that Narendra Modi is going to really need to look in at. And this is part of the reason that he's there, to build this sort of diplomatic relationship so that Israel and India can do business like this relatively easy.
All right, let's go back to arson really quickly. Joel, thanks for those updates. What about best practices that perhaps the farmers here could stand to gain, the agricultural aspect? What are some of the farmers in India and perhaps something that Modi could bring back home here to help the agrarian community? Arson?
Yeah, look, I'd add just 2 quick points on what Joel was just saying. And 2 of the really key centerpieces of the innovation and tech focus of Modi's visit here will be, one, there will be a CEO forum with the heads and of Israeli countries, also launching research, cyber innovation between the 2
All right, there's a little bit of an audio issue there. Unfortunately, Arsen, having a hard time hearing you. Hopefully we can get that connection fixed up. I'll bring in Ruben back with the same question. Ruben, let's start, talk about the agricultural aspect of all of this. How can perhaps India learn? We know that Modi's going to be going to some of the farms, and certainly the plight of farmers in India, we've seen that over the few months with regards to what's happened in many of the southern states. And what are some of the practices, some of the things that perhaps we could learn from Israel to perhaps bring home?
Well, dryland farming. Just dealing with desert conditions and managing with the minimal amount of water, and then of course the new technology of being able to extract water from the moisture in the air and use that for drip irrigation or even for drinking potable water. Right.
All right, next we are going to take a look at what Modi is talking about terrorism, which brings us to our next discussion about defense ties and terrorism. Let's listen in.
Alongside building a partnership for shared economic prosperity, we are also cooperating to secure our societies against common threats such as terrorism.
All right, that was Prime Minister Modi just speaking right after he arrived a short while ago, in fact, within the last hour. So this third segment, this discussion, will focus on Israel-Palestine as well as the defense and terrorism aspect. Well, Israel and India established diplomatic ties about 25 years ago. Israel's then Prime Minister Ariel Sharon was hosted by Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee in the year 2003. Modi is in Tel Aviv. He'll also visit Jerusalem and Haifa, but he will not be traveling to Ramallah, nor will he meet with Palestinian leaders during this trip, something that many leaders try to do sort of to maintain that political balance, those political ties. Previously, under the left-leaning Congress Party, former Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat regularly visited New Delhi. He was in fact pictured hugging then Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. In May, Modi hosted Arafat's successor, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, and offered help in health and IT, but the trip was very low-key. Politically, this visit also marks a shift in India's diplomacy. Remember, India has often lent support to Palestinians, which accuse Israel of occupation. But for 2 consecutive years under the Modi administration, India for the first time has abstained from a Palestine-sponsored UN resolution that demands for a probe into alleged war crimes by Israel. India did lend a hand to support certain resolutions that are critical of Israel. Israel cautiously welcomed India then, and now Modi's public embrace of the Jewish state makes one thing absolutely clear, that pragmatism will be the hallmark of India's foreign policy under Prime Minister Narendra Modi. All right, let's bring our guests back into the conversation. Certainly a topic that everyone is all too familiar with. Let's focus in on terrorism. We just heard Modi speak back about an hour ago, when it comes to terrorism. Ruben, let me start with you. When it comes to Israel's parliament, they don't always see eye to eye on a lot of topics, but it looks like when it comes to terrorism, it is something that there is always a consensus on how to handle anti-terror operations. Your thoughts?
Yes, which is why they're able to handle it so well. Here we have such a diverse, even though there are the opposition parties and the party in power, they have diverse thoughts about it, but they have to come together on this one thing, that we cannot tolerate terrorism. We cannot be pushed into doing things because we're frightened of a terrorist attack. So that's the one point on which they have to all come together. Otherwise, we cannot fight terrorism.
All right, Joe, let me bring you in as well in terms of sort of the terror angle. A thing or two that India could perhaps set to gain. I mean, certainly it seems like the Israelis know how to come together, at least when it comes to terror, something that India perhaps lacks.
Yeah, well, as Ruben was mentioning, Israelis, regardless of what side of politics they're on, when it comes to terrorism, there simply is no compromise. And part of the reason for that is because of mandatory service in the Israeli Defense Force as well. When you serve in the IDF, you learn, you understand, you have situational awareness, and your politics are put to one side when your nation is under attack. So that's why there is this no compromising stance that Israel takes. And to be fair to Israel, I mean, it is in many Western countries the envy of the world when it comes to security. You've got things like the Iron Dome, you have mandatory service, you've got incredible amounts of security at the airport, for example. I mean, just getting into Ben Gurion, you've got to drive something like 3 or 4 kilometres through winding roads just to get there. The airport was specially designed like that, so you don't have instances like you did, I believe it was in Belgium, where you had cars ramming the front of the airport packed with explosives. So there is a lot of, you could call it method to the Israeli madness even, but at the end of the day, they do what they need to protect their nation. And I think it's quite important to note, as you did, Archit, that Narendra Modi is not meeting with the Palestinian leadership, which is a step away from previous administrations and even what most world leaders would do. And I think that's bringing into line this solidifying relationship with the Israeli government as well, that Modi's almost coming to Netanyahu and saying, we're prepared to learn from you, teach us, and we will do business as a result.
Right, absolutely. Let's see if we get Arsen back, and hopefully we can hear you a little bit better this time. Arsen, perhaps lots going on there, and the connection is bad given the festivities. Arsen, my question to you is, in terms of defense, the defense deals, India, we know, is certainly one of Israel's biggest arms market, buying weapons at about $1 billion every year, getting things like drones, radar, and cybersecurity equipment. How will India stand to benefit with this specific visit? Arsen?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's some quite a number of practical ways that benefit.
All right, we're having a little bit of trouble there hearing Arsen. Hopefully we can get him back on the line. Let me bring that same question back to Ruben here. Ruben, let's talk about the defense deals in terms of India and Israel. You know, the fact that India is able to benefit so much, what do we see in terms of defense ties that could solidify with Modi's trip?
Well, I don't know too much about this, but as far as I can say, the defense ties have always been strong, whether overt or latent.
Right.
So I don't know whether this will increase them in any way.
Hopefully
Except
not hurt them.
specific deals. There may be some specific deals made, but there have always been purchases, defense purchases from Israel.
All right, let's see if we can chime Joel into the conversation. Joel, you know, Israel's always competing with other countries like Russia, the United States. When it comes to arms supply, they're willing to give their drones to India. And how important are these ties between the two? And is perhaps India's huge market the main attraction for Israel?
Definitely, and I think that also plays into the cyber security, cyber tech angle as well, which is what Modi is looking into. But it's important to note that since April, I think India has signed something like 3 missile deals with Israel, and I think that's worth a couple of $2 billion. And this is rather unprecedented, this amount of money being spent in such a short period of time leading up to this trip. But it's important to see, Archie, that Israel right now is India's number 2 weapons supplier. And again, this trip is all about business. It's all about forging ties. And Modi was very specific in his speech that he is unwavering in his stance towards fighting terrorism, and strengthening of defence ties, of course, plays into that. So I guess it's just a real wait and see. Both sides have played down any sort of terrorism or defence bills that would be announced over this trip. It's more so focused on the agricultural and tech startup. But rest assured, this trip is, at least in the back channels, all about forging new relationships and getting new contracts ready so that Israel can continue to supply India for years to come. Because, as Ruben mentioned, both countries have a very strong history in defence armament.
All right. We do appreciate both of your time. We appreciate Joel and Arsen joining us. Joel from Hong Kong and Arsen from the ground there in Tel Aviv with your perspectives. Thank you both so much for your insights on all things India and Israel, technology, trade, terror, and defense deals. We appreciate both of your inputs. All right, Ruben, we're going to keep you for a little bit longer. You have some things to show and tell. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, let's talk about the community here. You know, the history of how Jews came to India. India's Jewish community is keenly looking forward to this trip, as Modi just arrived in Israel about an hour back. The Jewish community in Kolkata is one of the smallest in India, but they have been demanding a minority status in the country. Around 6,000 Indian Jews live in the country. They're spread across West Bengal, Maharashtra, Kerala, Gujarat, and right here in New Delhi. So speaking of that, it is a tiny community, so well integrated even in their surnames that sometimes it's hard to tell an Indian Jew by their name, their dress, or even outward appearance. But Bollywood's Aditya Roy Kapoor, British artist Anish Kapoor, Naval Chief Admiral Sampson, all of those names surely ring a bell. Well, all of them are sons of Indians with Jewish genes. But when and exactly how did the first Jews arrive here in India, and why did they come? Our senior foreign editor Padma Rao takes a look back.
Muslims, Christian conquistadors and reformers, they all arrived in India. But how many of us know that it is Judaism that is India's oldest foreign religion, and that India has Asia's 4th largest Jewish community after Israel, the Asian part of Russia and Iran? From the Himalayas to the Deccan, from the Arabian Sea to the Bay of Bengal, here the Jews found no anti-Semitism. Instead, they melted into a multicultural society. But were they all escaping persecution in their holy land? Or are some of India's Jews from other parts of the world? Let's take a look. Cochin's Jews are the oldest and came on merchant ships from King Solomon's land, today's Israel, 900 years before the birth of Jesus Christ. And who wouldn't take to God's own country and its gentle cultured people? So they settled. The 16th century was a time when the big imperialist naval powers, Spain and Portugal, were tearing to the Orient, breathing Christian zeal. Along with them came Jewish diamond merchants, among the most envied and persecuted in Europe since times immemorial, and caricatured cruelly as gold diggers like Shakespeare's Shylock. When Iberia, today's Spain, expelled them, they settled in Madras, today's Chennai. Anyone would have run away from the dreadful Inquisition and zealous Portugal of the time. Thus fled Portuguese Jews to India. Though they faced some problems from the then Portuguese Goan authorities, the locals were gentle. Here they could shed enforced Christianity and return to their own religion, Judaism. Others who had settled in Karachi moved to Bombay, today's Mumbai, after the partition of India in 1947. Joining them were Jews from many other parts of today's Pakistan. Jews from Iraq, Iran and Afghanistan, collectively known as the Baghdadi Jews, only arrived about 250 years ago. Since many of them were in the jewelry trade, they settled in Surat in Gujarat. Then there are the Telugu Jews who are said to have fled from the ancient Holy Land across Central Asia and China down to Andhra Pradesh. And finally, the most recent converts, Mizo and Kuki tribes in Manipur and Mizoram. India and Israel are two ancient lands holy to all the world's oldest faiths. 70,000 Indian Jews have migrated to Israel, about 7,000 remain in India. The two countries disagree over many matters. So did Hermann Kallenbach and Mahatma Gandhi. But to the father of the nation, the Jewish South African architect, his closest friend, was, and I quote,
All right, we're getting live shots of Prime Minister Modi there. Let's take a look there. Live look at what is happening there right next to Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Both leaders there. It's been a little bit under an hour after that red carpet welcome. After they meet and greet, they will soon head to a dinner. He is going to be visiting the Danziger flower farm. So a live look at some of the visuals there. The first time any Indian Prime Minister has made it to Israel. Certainly a strong relationship when it comes to India and Israel, building ties on a host of issues. Of course, the talks will focus in on defense, agriculture, technology, water management, to name a few. Because we'll be cutting in and out of these live visuals as and when we see them. But again, a live look at what is happening there in Tel Aviv. You see Prime Minister Modi there right next to Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And of course, this is going to be a three-day trip, a three-day visit there. He's going to have a lot of things to address and talk about, but certainly this is being looked upon as a strong symbol between India and Israel when it comes to building those bridges. And we certainly saw that royal red carpet welcome about an hour ago when Prime Minister Modi arrived there in Israel and Tel Aviv. Again, you're taking a live look at some of the visuals there. So perhaps what will India gain? What will Israel gain? That is a big question, sort of the give and take. What will each country perhaps stand to benefit with this trip?
Agriculture to develop together major programs as family farming promotion as well as development of I am confident that the promotion of such projects will illuminate as a lighthouse to the families of the nations. Honorable Prime Ministers, India and Israel, two democracies, two ancient nations, proud with their history and heritage, aspiring to take advantage of opportunity for better common future. Let's do it together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's good. Explain.
Dear Prime Minister Modi, dear Prime Minister Netanyahu, dear Minister of Agriculture Ariel, dear Zahava and Ernst, the founders of Danziger Danflower Farm, and my parents. It is with great honor and admiration that we welcome you and your delegation here at Danziger on the occasion of this historic visit to Israel. We are incredibly excited to have you here. You represent a great nation, extraordinary both in matter and spirit. Your visionary transformation of India and your drive to reassert India's place as a global power while emphasizing rich cultural heritage. To all of us.
All right, you're taking a look there again, as you can see, Prime Minister Modi there right next to Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saying it is an honor to visit Israel, a key development partner. The three-day visit there will certainly encompass a lot of talks when it comes to technology, perhaps a thing or two from startups that India could perhaps learn, as well as the agricultural area, the sector of water management. He'll be visiting a farm. He'll be visiting Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, as well as Haifa. He will not be making it to Ramallah. There you see them sort of a light moment there, tossing, cheering each other with the drinks. You don't typically see that all the time, and a very informal setting there, even though they're dressed in formal attire. It's been about an hour, in fact, since Modi arrived there, Prime Minister Modi in Tel Aviv. Part of his 72-hour, 3-day trip there to Israel, the first time by any Indian Prime Minister, really building a bridge there with Israel. Certainly defense talks will be something that they will address. The arms supplier when it comes to cybersecurity, radars, drones, those are certainly on the agenda as both leaders meet there.
That's a very fast variety, the fastest in the world.
So let me also bring in Ruben here, Ruben Israel. We're seeing a look at these visuals as they're coming in. There we see Prime Minister Modi there. Certainly a huge reception. We don't always see that. In fact, we spoke to our guest earlier saying that it is unusual. You see that with the Pope, or we see that with the U.S. President. What do we make of that? That Israel is really going out, all about for that. Doing it full force, a warm, grand reception. What do we make of that, Ruben?
Maybe a celebration of the long ties that have long been hidden.
Perhaps. And when you saw that, it is unusual perhaps to see that. You don't typically see that, what is at stake perhaps for both of them? What does India stand to gain? What does Israel stand to gain? Sort of the give and take, or what are they both hoping to make of this trip?
Well, I think just business is the main thing. And that's why I really feel, to come back to this about business, if Israel makes it a little easier for Indian businessmen to travel, especially because Indian businessmen also travel to the Middle East, to the Arab countries in the Middle East. When an Indian businessman travels to Israel, even if he has his visa on a separate piece of paper, and his visa to enter Israel,
right,
if the Israeli immigration authorities insist for some cussed reason of their own to stamp the Indian passport, that Indian businessman has problems going to the Arab countries. So if it's made clear that the Israeli immigration authorities stamp only on the piece of paper that's a separate visa, then Indian businessmen can travel freely, because it's actually happened.
Perhaps the ease of doing business as well. The first stop, in fact, is going to be the Agricultural Institute there. Let's get into that a little bit. That's something that certainly is going to sort of dominate the agenda when it comes to the agricultural practices. We touched base on it a little bit before. What are some of the benefits of Modi's trip that could perhaps help people here in India, the farming community, the agrarian society here?
Well, this is a dryland agriculture, and how to use water to the best of our abilities, how to get water, how to desalinate. That's what I think he is going to be bringing back, technology that can do this.
Let's also go into the issue of startups. We've addressed that earlier, but startups, Bangalore, Hyderabad, many of these startup cities in India, even the big metros like Mumbai and Delhi, we see that boom. We see so many startups here budding. We know that Tel Aviv, of course, Israel also is strong when it comes to technology. How can the two countries perhaps work together to improve when it comes to the startup sphere?
This is really something I haven't thought about, or it's not really my field of expertise, but if two countries are coming up with a whole lot of ideas,
sure,
and they're bubbling with ideas,
right,
then getting the people who are bubbling with ideas together can only generate more than 1 + 1. It generates more than 2. So putting these thoughts together will generate that 3 from these 2.
When it comes to dealing with terror, what has Israel perhaps done right that India could stand to benefit from? They both obviously have issues with some of their neighboring countries, as do many countries around the world. What has Israel perhaps done right when it comes to terrorism, even if they don't see eye to eye in Parliament all the time? It seems like they're unified.
Unification in Parliament on this issue, no compromise. And what makes it perhaps a little easier for them than it is for us in India is that they are fighting an external terrorist, whereas in India we're fighting on several fronts, many of them internal terrorism. I mean, they're our own people, they're Indians who are
sort of dealing with it on both sides of the border too. It's not just, it seems like they're all over there.
Yes, it's not only from that side of the border, it's the terrorism is attacking us from within our own people and within our own border.
Let me also ask you this question. We're seeing some of the visuals in there earlier on that we brought to you as Prime Minister Modi arrived there. This, of course, the royal red carpet welcome as Modi arrived in Tel Aviv from New Delhi, of course. Why did it take, Ruben, let me ask you really quickly, why did it take so long, do you think? The first time since independence, the first time that ever an Indian Prime Minister has gone to Israel. What was perhaps the delay, or how surprised are you that no one else ever made that jump?
No, it's not surprising considering the fact that we were so dependent on the Arab countries for our oil supplies and as a job market.
Right.
That the governments have pussyfooted about this whole thing instead of saying, okay, we can be friends with you and we can be friends with them. And we don't have to take sides, so to speak.
All right. Well, let's see how all of this is being sort of covered around the world. Of course, dominating the headlines, certainly here in India. Well, in the West, many are looking at India's landmark visit to Israel with great interest. It is being held as a proof of India's modernization in terms of both economy as well as foreign policy. WION's London Bureau Chief, Mandy Clark, reports.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit is seen as placing an official seal on an increasingly close relationship with Israel that is underpinned by billions of dollars in arms sales. Many commentators see the trip as proof of a maturing relationship between the countries, with India focusing on deepening defense, technological and commercial ties with the Jewish state, and not just seeing the country in terms of India's policy to the Palestinians. And India is a key part of Israel's movement away from its traditional European partners and towards the rising Asian economies. Pundits are also questioning whether the move will anger India's large Muslim population, as Israel is often painted as an anti-Muslim state. Newspapers here in London have given a historic overview of relations between the two countries and see it as a move from India away from its old Cold War Soviet allies and towards the West, a move that is welcome here. Mandy Clark, WION, London.
All right, again, a quick live look at what is happening there on the ground in Tel Aviv. A little bit more than 60 minutes since Prime Minister Modi arrived there. He is now meeting with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. It is a warm relationship between India and Israel, a policy shift for both countries. The first time an Indian leader, in fact, visiting Israel. A live look there at the farm area that they are, the flower farm, the Danziger flower farm, where we see Modi in. Taking a look at some of those visuals coming in. We saw the royal red carpet welcome a short while back. Certainly lots on the agenda for both leaders to address and discuss. There they are sitting down and discussing there. Quite a lot of things to talk about over the next 72 hours. Agriculture, some of the space issues, defense deals, terrorism, technology, just to name a few.
No, you are very cold there because you know.
All right, let's go to Mandy Clark, our bureau chief in London, standing by. Mandy, let's talk about how important this sort of a visit is for Modi, the first time for any Indian leader to visit Israel. How is it all being sort of played out there in the European media, if any?
And certainly it is. It's really through the lens that this is a maturing relationship. It's not simply how your relationships with Israel matter, in terms of the policy of the Palestinians, because Israel is a more complex country and has lots of trade. So it shows a modernization that has been very much welcome, where the papers have picked up the story. They see it very much as this warming relations of India to Western countries, because Israel is very much considered a Western ally. So it's people are looking with great interest. Certainly, they would welcome these warming relations with Israel in the hopes that it will only mean warmer relationships with European powers as well. But certainly, it seems like a more in-depth warming and a modernization of the view of Israel and what Israel can offer India.
Mandy, let me also ask you in terms of what both sides sort of have to gain when it comes to, a host of issues, whether it's agriculture or, learning about how the other handles counter-terror operations, startups, technology, in fact. I mean, there's a host of issues that both stand to gain. Maybe let's talk about some of the highlights for each country. What does India gain and what will Israel gain? The first, as we mentioned, the first time any Indian Prime Minister has visited Israel. What's in it for both nations?
Well, certainly it's that defense, it's commercial, it's technological ties that India can gain. It's that that knowledge and technology that it can harness, that Israel has developed, that they can bring back to India and use it. So that is a fantastic advantage, and certainly one that Prime Minister Narendra Modi is looking to focus on. This trip is all about building those ties, especially those trade ties. Israel has had long growing difficulties with its European partners, who are increasingly critical of Israel over their policies with the Palestinians. They are looking to increase their trade also around the world, especially with rising Asian economies. And the keystone to that new policy is really India. Israel sees it as a massive offering. They've already got billions of dollars of trades in arms. They have similar issues that they are fighting against, particularly with terrorism.
Right.
They see India now as a natural partner.
And Mandy, really quickly as well, I also wanted to ask you perhaps, how will this be seen on the global arena for the fact that India and Israel's relationship certainly is becoming stronger? I mean, even just this year alone, we talked about this even when Modi was in Washington, D.C. and the Netherlands. He's really done a lot in terms of foreign policy, building those bridges, expanding those relationships all around the world, specifically this year, 2017, all over Europe, Sri Lanka, France. I mean, you know, most world powers. How will perhaps the U.S. and Russia sort of view this in other countries, India and U.S. as India and Israel's rather, sort of a bonding, the diplomatic strengthening between these two countries?
Well, it's interesting. The U.S. seems to be engaging in this policy of isolationism. It's pulling away from a lot of its unions and connections around the world. And you're seeing India open up, and it's really deepening their relationship across the world. So it's two very opposites of two major powers. It's really putting itself on the world stage. And what's really telling is willing to have this relationship with Israel, which can be quite fractious on especially dealing with West Asian countries, because there's a lot of animosity towards Israel and many Muslim states. The fact that India is making a stand saying we can be friends with Israel, we can be friends with Saudi Arabia, we can be friends with many other countries, that's really important. It shows a level of confidence also of India opening up, becoming a world player. So certainly people are taking notice on the world stage of India's increased confidence and prominence.
All right, Mandy, we'll come back to you in a quick second, but really quickly, I want to bring in Ruben. Ruben, I know you have some surprises for us. You perhaps brought us there, perhaps not for me to keep, but show us some of the items that you brought, some of the rich cultural heritage that you're here to share with us.
It's not really rich cultural anything. It's just what the Jews wear when they pray.
Well,
I thought that might be relevant. There's the kippah, the prayer cap that one wears on the head here. And there's the prayer shawl.
We were expecting snacks and all that. We thought there'll be snacks and food. Just kidding.
Oh, okay.
And the shawl as well,
that
right?
you have to get Modi to bring back from Israel for us.
We'll tweet him, perhaps.
Yeah, this is the shawl.
This is the shawl. Put it on the table, perhaps, so we can see it there. Okay.
This is the prayer shawl that one gets when one has one's bar mitzvah at the age of 13, or the bat mitzvah at the age of 13.
Okay.
For young girls, that's the coming of age, and these are the two things I brought. I couldn't bring the ram's horn, which is the shofar, which
we'll get it for you next time. Maybe tomorrow when we have you back. Let me also ask you, you know, in terms of here in India, you know, how with so many other religions, Hinduism, Islam, Sikhism, so many other religions, perhaps the Indian Jews here, have they perhaps borrowed or adapted some of those things that you see in other cultures or other festivals for their own identity? How is it here for Indian Jews in terms of perhaps their identity?
Well, in terms of religion, there's been no adaptation or borrowing. But the practices, some of the practices, for example, when one gets married, there's the Mehndi ceremony, which is not a Jewish ceremony. There's the rubbing of the haldi and sandalwood paste on the body, which is again not Jewish.
Right.
Then there's the malida, which is a very Muslim custom of serving a malida on auspicious occasions.
Right.
This is how we've not changed the religion at all, but some of the customs have been adapted and taken from our neighbors of other religions.
Okay.
That's how it's been.
Let's also, while we want to talk about food. Food is something that everybody can bond over. Have perhaps some of the dishes changed, in your opinion? Are there, as someone who comes here might find a different flavor because there's some perhaps ingredients that are now Indianized, if you would like to call it, or not necessarily?
No, but let's go back. One needs to go back a bit because the Jews in India have followed the custom, the food restrictions of not eating pig, not eating shellfish, not eating fish with scales on it, not eating a meal where there's milk and meat in the same meal. Like you can't have butter chicken, or if I was a really good Jew, I wouldn't eat butter chicken. But so these are the restrictions that an Orthodox Jew, even in India, would follow.
Okay.
But like anywhere in the world, the orthodoxy has come down. So people are eating a variety of substances, but they try to stick to these restrictions. And the food an Indian Jew has is very much like what they would have in Maharashtra or anywhere in the country.
It's sort of perhaps been modernized.
Yeah, except with these restrictions.
All right. I also want to ask you, a sort of a follow-up question, perhaps something that you may be able to relate to. How do the Indian Jews feel about the fact that it did take decades for the Israel Orthodox community and the government to perhaps recognize that the Indian Jews were genuine Jews and to offer citizenship? Is that something that you could perhaps shed some light on?
If I was an affected person, if I had gone to Israel thinking I'd be welcomed with open arms and I wasn't, I'd give them the boot and come back.
Right.
So that would be my attitude. I never bothered going, and I never would want to go. So it's really, must have been very hurtful for the people who went there to then be told that you're not real Jews, or prove that your mother was Jewish and prove that for 3 generations back.
Are there any concerns in terms of discrimination or anti-Semitism that Jews here perhaps faced?
Zero.
Zero.
Jews in India have never faced any discrimination. In fact, if anything, there's a positive discrimination. I mean, when you say, introduce yourself and somebody asks you, what's your caste, what's your religion, and you say Jewish, there's an, oh, you're Jewish.
It's almost like an eye-opener, a light bulb.
And first of all, it's a surprise. It's often a surprise to many people in India that there is a Jewish community, and it's existed here for the last 2,000 plus years.
All right, and we are unfortunately out of time, but I'm going to do a quick thing, a little closing wrap-up. Let me go to Mandy, standing by. Mandy, closing thoughts on what we can expect over the next 72 hours between Modi and, of course, Netanyahu, and what we can sort of accomplish. Your thoughts?
Really that focus on trade deals, strengthening the relationship, and seeing as much information sharing, technological sharing, to develop these relationships going forward.
All right, and so with you as well, Ruben, Israel. Closing comments, closing thoughts. What do we expect? We know the folks are excited here, folks are excited in Israel. What your prediction?
More business.
More business, yes. More deals.
All right, more deals, and I'm looking forward to that. And making it easier for Indian businessmen, as I said. That's very important.
All right, and we have a quick soundbite that we can play for you from both Modi and Netanyahu, a very appropriate way to end this discussion. Let's listen into that before we wrap up.
Singular honor to be the first ever Prime Minister of India to undertake this groundbreaking visit to Israel. I want to thank my friend, Prime Minister Netanyahu, for the invitation and for receiving me with so much warmth. My visit celebrates the strength of centuries-old links between our societies.
My friend Prime Minister Narendra Modi, welcome to Israel. आपका स्वागत है मेरे दोस्त. Prime Minister, we've been waiting for you a long time. We've been waiting almost 70 years, in fact, because yours is truly a historic visit. It's the first time an Indian Prime Minister is visiting Israel. We receive you with open arms. We love India.
All right, and that does it for this special broadcast on WION. Shalom Namaste. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Archit Seshadri. We have continuous coverage with WION in Israel of all of Modi's visit over the next few days. Continue watching, and with that, have a good night.